tutorial brush lettering series. It's hard to believe that September is already over and we are well into October. For me, September was a month of transition. Many people have to change our mindsets to accommodate new seasons, schedules, routines. By October, we've kind of made the transition, and now we're starting to prepare ourselves for all of the busyness that tends to pop up in the last months of the year. Although it is sad to say goodbye to summer, at least in my part of the world, we're saying goodbye to summer. It's exciting to look ahead to the holiday season and a brand new year. So this lesson is all about looking ahead and preparing. We will be focusing on building the foundation of all lettering, the basic strokes, so that when it comes time to putting it all together and creating beautiful letters and words, we will have everything we need. Just want to mention that it is raining pretty good outside. It might even get a little bit of a storm. So if you can hear the rain in the background, I apologize. But maybe you enjoy it. I personally love the sound of the rain. But anyway, before we dive into part 2, let's briefly review what we learned in part 1 and talk just very quickly about the tools we'll be using in part 2. So in part 1, I talked about what brush lettering is and what supplies, both writing instruments and writing surfaces, can be used to create brush lettering. I then showed you these super important techniques for creating the thick and thin lines by using different amounts of pressure with your writing instrument. I also talked about the fact that this series, though informative in nature, is not meant to be a one-stop shop for learning brush lettering. The primary goal here is to create a relaxing atmosphere where you can learn a new skill if you choose, but you can also just sit back, relax, and enjoy the content without actively participating in the tutorial. So, for this video, we're only going to need a few basic supplies. So for writing instruments, I will be using these Crayola Classic broadline markers. So broadline, they're just like the normal Crayola markers. They're great because they are so inexpensive. They're washable, they come in a wide range of colors, and they have an awesome contrast between thick and thin lining. Plus, you can find them just about anywhere. But there's that tip. You can use whatever writing instrument you have on hand. Don't feel pressured to go buy anything, but it should have a flexible tip, either like these Crayolas or any of the instruments I showed you in the last video. I suppose if you want, you could even use a pencil that has a soft lead. Okay, so those are my writing instruments. Okay, for paper, I am using this HP Premium Choice LaserJet paper, and it is very white. You can buy it in reams like this. I bought mine in a huge box of like 6 reams. but I enjoy it because it's affordable per page. The per page cost is pretty affordable, but also the surface of the paper is very smooth, and it's very nice to your pens and markers, so it won't fray the tips quite as quickly as normal paper. Also, like I said, it's super bright white, which just makes colors pop. So this is the paper I am using. Additionally, if you so choose, you could decide to have tracing paper on hand as well. I have some guide sheets that you can print out, and you can either slide underneath tracing paper, or you can just use the actual the guide sheets on normal paper too. But I'll talk more about this in a moment. I will also be using a clipboard here because my writing surface isn't hard. But if you are following along with this tutorial on a desk or a tabletop, then I don't think it's necessary to have a clipboard. So rather than drawing out guidelines for this lesson, I created a couple of sets of practice sheets that are just blank lined paper that you can download from the link in the video description, and you can print it right onto your smooth surface practice paper, or you can print it on regular paper and use it underneath the tracing paper, or other smooth semi-transparent paper like marker paper would work, or layout bond or something like that. But this is how, if you want to save on computer paper or ink, by the way, this is what it looks like, then you can invest in a little pad of tracing paper, not too expensive. And then this is how you would use that. You would just have one sheet of the practice paper. You would slide it underneath a sheet of tracing paper, and then you would just use the guidelines through the paper. And then once you fill a page, you can just flip a new page and slide your sheet under the next one. It's nice if you don't have really smooth printer paper, because like I said, normal printer paper can really chew up your pens quickly. Tracing paper is a lot kinder to your pens, so that's an option too, if you want. But certainly not necessary. Okay? I guess if you were so inclined, you could also download the practice sheets onto your iPad and work on them digitally if you had a program like Procreate that would allow you to use a pressure-sensitive stylus to create our basic strokes. So there's a lot of options. So the size of these practice sheets was made to work well with medium-sized markers like these Crayolas. If you're using a Tombow dual-tip pen, you might have some trouble fitting it all in the lines. Or if you're using something small like a pencil, again, these lines might be a little bit too wide. So there are hundreds of templates online that I'm sure you could find a great size for yourself if this size doesn't work for you. So if you don't want to use these practice sheets, you can always just take a ruler and a pencil and create your own like we did in the last video. And so finally, I also just have a pencil and eraser handy. I like to use pencils or pens to mark up my practice strokes to help me kind of improve. This is just a regular number 2 pencil. And then this is a Staedtler Mars plastic eraser. It kind of comes out like that. Not a lot left. I use it a lot. I always recommend using white erasers rather than the typical like pink ones you might have gotten for school, because white erasers are softer, they're stickier, and they're not going to damage your paper as much as pink ones will, or at all. They're really nice. So that is it for supplies. So let's get started with those basic strokes. what the heck are these basic strokes I keep talking about? Well, there are 7 strokes that, when combined, they make up all the letters in the alphabet. These are lowercase letters. They use the thick and thin line weight techniques that we started practicing last week. So I made some little cards to show you each stroke, because I'm a huge dork like that. Okay, so we have first the entrance stroke, also known as the entrance and exit stroke. I'm just going to call it the entrance stroke, but we can use it both at the beginning and the end of a letter. Entrance stroke. And then we have the underturn, which is very similar to a U shape. And I just want to take one moment now to mention that as I proceed through the rest of this series, you're going to notice that all of my writing takes on an angle like this. That is just how I prefer to create brush lettering. I like how it looks at an angle. But if you're more comfortable with vertical strokes, then I would encourage you to flip your strokes so that they are vertical, and just keep them upright on the page. I apologize that I'm not going to be teaching both methods, but it's too much work and I'm not very good at writing straight up and down. So if you like the kind of elegant look of something like this, with this beautiful italicized leaning lettering, then just follow along with the angles I use. But if you prefer more up and down lettering, then adjust with your own strokes. Okay, so that's the underturn. You can see it has 2 different line weights. And then we have the overturn, and it's the opposite of the underturn. It also has 2 line weights, but it's an upside down U. Next, we have the compound curve, and this is a combination of an overturn and an underturn that are connected with one graceful downstroke. And then we have the ascending stem loop. And this is a stem loop that goes up, and it's great for letters that have a long line at the side, like a D or a B. And then here's the descending stem loop, and it's the opposite of the ascending stem loop. And again, it's great for letters that have a tail, like a G or a J. And finally, we have the oval, which is just a enclosed ovular shape. So let's take a look at each of these strokes in greater depth. Do some warm-ups and start practicing them and learning how to get them on paper. Okay, so those are our strokes. Here are some practice sheets you can get started with. You can download these from the link in the video description as well. These are the ones titled Basic Strokes Practice Sheets, because I've taken the liberty of putting in some practice strokes to help you get that muscle memory down. So feel free to print these out and write directly on them like I'm going to do here, or you can place them under the tracing paper like I just showed you a little while ago. So I'm going to grab a marker and we can get started. Okay, so these first 2 rows, I'm just going to move these out of my way. The first 2 rows up here are warm-ups. They are the upstrokes and downstrokes that we learned last week. Before you start lettering, regardless of your skill level, it's always a good idea to warm up. So we're going to warm up with the upstrokes and downstrokes. Go ahead and do your first line of those light pressure upstrokes. I will do my best, but I'm trying to keep my head out of the camera, so it's a little tricky for me to do it properly, but I'll do my best. So I've also written these little guidelines. You start at the bottom where the dot is, and you drag your pen up using light pressure. So I'm just going to practice with these ghost lines that I've created. And to the best of my ability, I am going to work from like the elbow more so than the hand. But it's a little challenging when I'm on a fabric surface because my hand doesn't really move. But as you do it, just do like we did last week. Focus on keeping them parallel and evenly spaced. And kind of equal length, so starting and stopping right on the line if possible. And nice and straight, so I can see that some of mine are starting to wobble a little bit. And just really focus on the movement of your arm. I'm going to pull this a little closer to myself, get it right in that comfortable writing zone. So I am losing that angle. I gotta readjust. Okay, so that row is pretty pathetic. But that's okay. That's a warm-up, right? Okay. Okay, so now that I've finished a row very poorly, I am going to assess my work and look for things that I'm doing well and things that could use some practice. So I'll take my little pencil and I'm going to review my row. I'll bring you a little bit closer too. If I can bring you just a little closer. Okay. So it's very imperfect, but that's okay. We're not aiming for perfection. You can see that I started out pretty well. This stroke really went well. So I'm going to put a little check mark by it. That's a good one. This one I like. It's a little wobbly, but it's got a good angle. Some of these I'm noticing I start a little bit too high, which is not great, but at least the lines are straight. And then here, starting about right here, they get real wonky. They start to curve, and this one's curving like that. And then what is the deal with the spacing? So clearly, I need to just work on slowing down. I need to work on picking up my pen and anticipating the end of that line before I get the top up here. And I also need to focus on muscle control and just creating those nice straight lines on the paper. Okay? So, I'll keep you zoomed in and we can work on our downstrokes. So grab another marker. Okay, got a nice pink one here. Hot magenta. So I'm going to rotate my paper because that's the most comfortable for my arm. And like I said last time, do what works best for your body. Okay? So, open up the pen marker. And we'll just start with the downstrokes. So starting at the top and pulling our pen down and trying to stop right at that line. Okay? So my pen might be a slightly different shape than the ghosts here, but they're pretty close, so oof, and right away I can see that I abandoned my angle, so I want to correct it right now, and get back to the angle that I started with. Okay, so that's great. So go ahead and do your row of downstrokes if you're joining me. Just really nice focus on control. Nice and slow. Use that heavy pressure to create that beautiful thick line. With Crayola markers, it's about half about pressure, half about angle of the pen. See, I push with much less pressure and my pen is way thinner, but you do have this chisel side, and if you lay your pen on its side, you can get huge strokes. It takes quite a bit of control, so I like to write on the tip, but just press down nice and heavy to create the thick, heavy downstroke. Okay, great. So, now let's take a look at my work. This one was the one where I was demonstrating using the side of the pen. I'm looking at these 5 lines here, and they look very parallel to me. They're really nice. The line weights are consistent from top to bottom, except for maybe on this one. They're evenly spaced for the most part. I just have a couple little spots where I go above the line, but that's a starting issue, not a stopping issue. So if I look at my base row, I never go past the base. So I was really paying attention to anticipating the end of the line and picking up before the bottom. So I think I improved on this row. Okay, that's awesome. So feel free to take a few minutes to assess your own work and figure out what might go better next time. And then we will start with our first real basic stroke. Great job with your practice strokes. I know it seems redundant, but this kind of practice is so crucial for creating uniform and even letters. Warming up with simple lines will help prepare your body and mind for the next step, which is the basic strokes. So, trust me, you will appreciate the practice that you've put in once you start working through these basic strokes. So, let's start with the entrance stroke right here. So the entrance stroke, also called the exit stroke, as I mentioned, is very similar to an upstroke. Let me zoom you in a little bit. Okay, so we're right here. So it's similar to an upstroke in that the entire line is drawn in an upward direction from baseline to midline, and the entire stroke is one single pressure, and it's a light pressure. So you might notice that instead of being straight, the entrance stroke is curved because we want it to follow the beginning and end of letters and also provide a joining between letters. So it's curved. We're going to just use the tip of our pen to place right here and then drag it upward in that curved line. So it's used for almost all letter transitions, either at the beginning of a letter, the end of a letter, or both. So let's go ahead and fill in our row of upstroke or entrance strokes. And just kind of pay attention after you draw each stroke what you can improve on for the very next stroke, okay? So I'm gonna admit to you the entrance strokes are probably my weakest stroke, but that's why I should practice. So let's practice. Start at the bottom, pull up, and again I'm trying to get my arm to move more so than my wrist or hand. So what I struggle with is getting it long enough, but you really do want it to reach forward with that slight curve. So I'm liking this one a lot. I'm just going to go put a little check mark by it to help encourage me. Yes, whatever you did right there, that was a good one. Reach forward, reach. Reach forward, So now if you're going to do a vertical, you still want it to angle, but you would maybe do it more vertical like that, as opposed to like that, okay? So just be mindful if you don't want to do these curved or angled letters. This one would be how you do a vertical style. So, okay. Beautiful. So, as I look at my lines here, okay, I was definitely focusing on stopping successfully at that midline. There are just a few that go over the line, so that's a big improvement from this line. But I was so focused on that I kind of went below the line a few times down here. I also noticed that the angle is very inconsistent, and that's why, for me, the entrance strokes are so tough. For me, it's hard to conceptualize the strokes just as is, rather than like in a letter. It makes so much more sense to me when I know there's another shape coming after it. So maybe you'll notice the same issues, maybe not, but it's just interesting for me to think about. Awesome, great job. Now let's try the underturn. So the underturn is our first multi-pressure stroke. It is shaped like a U. I'll bring you in here. So it's shaped like a U, and it's drawn by placing our pen first at the midline here, and then we're going to use heavy pressure to pull our pen down toward the baseline, and then gently lift off the paper when we near the baseline to create that very graceful upstroke that's also, if you notice, going to have the same angle as your entrance stroke. What I really love about this stroke is the gorgeous transition from thick to thin right at the bottom, right before the bottom line. It's very beautiful. It's a little tough to get it just right, but once you do, it makes your letters so elegant and gorgeous. So, there are some pitfalls when you're working with multi-pressure strokes, and I'm going to show them to you. So, okay. So, here's how you correctly do it. You place your writing instrument on the midline and do heavy pressure. Then I lifted my pen. You don't have to lift your pen, but just release the pressure. Turn around for that U. Okay, so that's a bad example. We'll do another good one. Heavy pressure, release the pressure, come around for that U. I'm sorry, I don't know why my hand is a little nervous today. And also, these might be slightly small for the pens I'm using. But what can happen is if you wait too long and don't release your pressure until you've made it around, then you're going to get this chunky looking bottom here. And that's not typical of the style. You want to try to lift the pressure from your marker right here so that it's the light pressure all the way through the bottom of the stroke. You can see it taper off right here, and that's what you want to see. So it can take quite a bit of practice to accomplish that, but the only way you will get better is by practicing. So I suggest doing several rows of these and getting used to feeling your hand release that pressure. Now, I can see that I've kind of lost the angle on some of these. I can also feel that my hand is doing a lot of the work because I'm not really able to write comfortably while filming. And so I'm getting these funky shapes. But if I had been leaned over and using my elbow, my shaping would have been a lot nicer. But this is pretty good for just kind of getting started and practicing. Take a moment to assess your work. So something we want to look for is, here's what we want to look for with the underturn. we want a consistent angle of the letters. So this letter is angled like this. That's the angle we want to follow for all of them. And I can see that, like, this one's pretty close. This one might be slightly too leaned, but for the most part, a lot of these are pretty good angle-wise. We also want to focus on creating really even spacing between the downstroke and upstroke. So this is pretty appropriate spacing. You don't want it to be too cramped or pinched. I'll do an example. Just above it, so I'm sorry if this bothers your OCD, but if you do it too narrow, well, first of all, it looks really pinched and not pretty. And then if you do it too wide, it's gonna make the writing very illegible when you put it all together with the letters, and it's gonna look very childlike doing it that way. So you want to shoot for a happy medium. It's a comfortable width where the inside of your stroke has some room to breathe, and you can fit like a tiny oval in there. Okay, so that's important to pay attention to. And then we also just want to try to shoot for an even pressure. So whatever pressure we use on the downstroke in here should be the same as this and this and this. And so I had a couple struggles. This one's a bit too thin, but the rest look pretty good to me, pressure-wise. So it's a lot to think about, but you should keep it in your brain as you make these strokes, because the more you think about it, the more it will just sort of become part of your muscle memory. Okay? Alright. So, now we're going to take a look at the overturn, which is this last stroke down here. Grab a new marker. Okay, so the overturn is basically the opposite of the underturn. We're going to start at the baseline for this one with a gentle, like a light pressure upstroke. The difference between this upstroke and this upstroke is the curve. So we're going to be curving it forward rather than under. Does that make sense? Curving it over rather than under. And then once we round the top, we're going to press down with our pen and create that nice heavy pressure to finish right there on the baseline. So just like with the underturn, we're going to try to wait until we round the curve before we push down with full pressure, okay? So again, as you're doing these, look for finding the same spacing as your underturns and the same amount of pressure as well. These are sister strokes. They should be very similar to one another. So I will attempt to do some underturns. So gentle pressure all the way up the stroke, round the top, press down. Nice. Gentle pressure as you get up there, round the top, press down. Good. Light, gentle pressure, and then press down. Very nice. Now I'm on my own. Sometimes I notice if I do several strokes at once, or in a row, without rotating my pen, the pen tip starts to get like pointy, or it starts to point. So then I can just rotate the marker the other way, and we'll bend it back the other way. So I rotate every few strokes with inexpensive pens like these. So I'm just going to practice, and I want to make sure I get that nice forward lean going on. Just really pay attention. Okay. Alright, so that row is done now. The thing about the underturn and the overturn are, like I said, they're sister strokes. So if if you've done them correctly and you've gotten the spacing correct and you're very consistent, then what you should be able to do is flip your page over, and the stroke should be pretty much identical, so that these overturns now look exactly like underturns, and these underturns now look exactly like overturns. That's what we're shooting for. We want them to be pretty much indistinguishable from one another when you turn your page upside down. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna grab another pen, marker, and we will do our friend the compound curve. So this is one of my favorite strokes. So the compound curve is basically a combination of the overturn and underturn strokes, except that their shape is slightly varied. So let me show you. Excuse me. Let me show you. So it starts at the baseline just like an overturn, and we're going to create basically an overturn, but instead of pushing your pen into the page all the way to the baseline, we're going to gently lift off and turn it right back around into an underturn. Okay, so it's about creating this really elegant, almost S-shaped curve in the middle of the stroke. The toughest part of the stroke is getting those transitions from thin to thick to thin, nice and clean. It can be tricky also to make both parts of the stroke even, so leaving even spacing between both parts of the stroke. But if you do it successfully, you should be able to flip the page just like with the underturns and overturns, and it should be indistinguishable. It should look exactly like another compound curve if you flip the page. So that's what we're looking for. We want even spacing, same angle of the curves, and we want it to be able to be flipped upside down to look just like itself. Okay, so go ahead and do a row or two as I do my row here, and we'll assess our work again. Okay, so light pressure up, push down, lift up quick, and up. And it looks like my marker is out of ink, so I'll just go back to this blue one. Okay, so again, starting at the base, light pressure around the tip, press down. Oh, this is a very fresh pen. Lift up and up for that gentle upstroke. Now, this line is very straight. I don't want that. I want it to curve. So we're going to start again. Light pressure, heavy pressure, lift up, light pressure. And the stroke didn't get quite as heavy as I wanted. Okay, so go ahead and do the rest of your page. And try to get those nice, even spaces. And try to get the nice angle if you're going for an angle. Mine are pinching, so this one was wider. I need it to be wider to look more like my underturns and overturns. There we go. That was way better. Okay. Alright. So that's not too bad. These three actually, for me, they're very narrow. I don't like the look of that, especially when I compare it to the overturns right here. This overturn is so much skinnier than this, right? So I adjusted, and now it's wider, and now it's the same width, and this underturn is the same width. Alright, so I encourage you to go through figure out what went wrong, how you could improve, and maybe even do another page of these strokes, and then we'll come back and we'll finish out the last 3 strokes. Okay, great job with our first 4 strokes. Now we're going to take a stab at the ascending stem loop, which is right here. So I'm going to grab a different pen, marker, sorry, to this red. Bring you closer again. Come on in, come on in. Yes, you come on in. Okay. Come a little closer. Okay. So the ascending stem loop is our first full-length stroke, meaning it takes from the very top line to the base line. We're going to start at the midline, right here, and we're going to create a kind of backward, well, it's actually not backward. We're going to basically create an upstroke. So if we look at our upstrokes here, the angle of this is very similar to this. So we're going to create a backward, or an upstroke that's going to loop backward around, and then at the top line, we're going to put some nice heavy pressure and pull our marker pen down to the baseline. Okay? So, again, as with the other strokes we've learned, we're going to try to round the top row before pushing down fully. Because if we start pushing down like up here, it's going to create this really flat, kind of chunky look, just like I showed you before. So make it around and then push down. Now some people like to start their stroke higher up. I'll do an example in pencil. Some people prefer their strokes to have a much smaller loop like this. Some people prefer even a more huge loop like this. Either of these are fine, and once you start lettering and expanding on style, you'll probably end up using these. But I like practicing with just like this even midline style because it just helps build that muscle memory, and I also think it looks nice. So figure out what works best for you, and then whatever you choose, make yours consistent, okay? So I am going to go ahead and do my row now of my ascending stem loops. So, like I said, we're going to start at the midline with a nice gentle pressure up. Once I round that top, sorry I lifted my pen, I'm going to press down and get that full pressure stroke. So once again, we're going to go up, around the top, and push down. Light upstroke, round, push down. There we go. Okay? Start one over here. Light upstroke, round, push down. So what I've noticed immediately is this line is pretty curved. I don't really want it to be that curved. It should have some curve to it, but not too much. I want it to be, for the most part, straight. Just a slight curve. And these look a little bit like peas, but they're not actually used in peas. Okay? So I'm going to look now at my strokes. So what I'm seeing is, again, I had some weird curving issues here, but these next 3 look pretty good to me. We really want to focus on keeping a nice open space up here in the loop. We don't want it to be too flattened. We also don't want it to be way too wide. We want it to be fairly consistent with our other strokes. So if we look at this oval here, the width of the oval, oh, you can't see that at all. The width of the oval is pretty similar to the width of this loop. The loop might be just a little narrower. Okay? So go ahead, I encourage you, assess your own work, figure out what's working for you, and come on back when you're ready to do the descending stem loop. Welcome back. I really enjoyed the ascending stem loops. their sister stem, or their sister stroke, is the descending stem loop. And it's pretty much the same stroke, but backward. So for this stroke, we're going to start at the midline again, but we're going to start with our downstroke. And we're going to pull it down past the baseline, down to the next, basically top line, and then loop it back around to the midline where it will join up with itself. So the angle of this upstroke is opposite to this angle. Okay, so we're going to do this shape rather than this shape. Okay, so you can see the spacing between this baseline and this top line is even, so that's what we're going for. And just like with the underturn, overturn, these are sister strokes, so that if you flip it upside down, they should be pretty much indistinguishable from one another. Okay? So, let's get our nice little orange circuit marker and practice a few of these. Okay? So, we're going to start at the midline with full pressure, bring our pen down, lift up before we hit the baseline, curve back around. Full pressure down, lift up before the base, curve around. Full pressure, lift, curve. Full pressure, lift, curve. Full pressure, lift, curve. Okay, my loops are starting to get a little bit too big, so I'm going to monitor that as I make my next stroke. There we go. Full pressure, lift, curve up. It got too big again. Full pressure, lift, curve around. Good. Full pressure, lift, curve. Full pressure, lift, curve. Full pressure, lift, curve. Okay, so that last one got a little bit vertical because I was going too fast. But if I was to grade this or judge this, I would say these ones need some work. The loops aren't quite as elegant as these loops are. They're definitely irregular. I have some angle issues. This one's okay, this one's okay, this one's okay. This one's a bit too much that way. This one's a bit too much that way. This one's kind of okay. Too vertical and way too far off. Okay, so that's what I would work on, is just getting them as parallel as possible, not only with each other, but also with their counterpart, the ascending stem loop. Okay, so these two strokes can be a little bit tricky to nail just right, but I promise if you practice daily and really focus on developing that muscle memory, you'll see improvements really quickly. So, okay, so now it is time for our final stroke, which is the oval. A lot of people think of the oval as the most challenging stroke, but I want you to be the judge for yourself. So the oval, as its name suggests, is an ovular shape, and it has two types of pressure. So there are two methods for creating this stroke. First, you can start right at the top and go directly into a heavy downstroke, then lift up, come back up with a light upstroke, and then join it at the top. That's probably the most beginner-friendly method. So my preferred method, however, is what I've drawn for you here. You're going to start slightly below the midline, and you're going to do a very tiny upstroke backward before pressing down your pen and going back through the rest of the stroke, lifting up, and then rejoining your original line. So the start and stop point for this stroke is right here rather than at the very top. It's trickier to do it this way, but the transition that you get is a lot more elegant and it's less chunky. So I'm going to show you the first way, and then I'm going to continue my row with my preferred way. So get our beautiful hot pink marker out here. And so I'm just going to show you. Okay, so using my guidelines, I'm going to do it the way I suggest first. So we're going to start right around here. I honestly don't know how well you can see that. And then we're going to go backward and then press down and then lift up and then meet ourselves right there again. So go up, around the corner, press down, lift up, around the corner, and join. Up, press down, around the corner, join. So I'll do one more like that, just to show you what it looks like without the guidelines. Okay, and that one honestly didn't look the best, but it is this method I recommend. So then if we start directly at the downstroke, at the top, that's one way you can do it as well. And honestly, it doesn't look bad, does it? Let's do another one like that. It doesn't look bad. But I don't know. I'm more comfortable starting it like that. So you can choose whatever way works best for you, and then go ahead and fill in your entire row. What we want to pay attention to is keeping a nice breathable space in the center of the stroke. We want to keep even pressure, between the strokes. We want the downstrokes to all be the same thickness, upstrokes to be the same. This oval got way too tall and round and narrow. So they are a little tricky, but I think they're really beautiful. Okay. So overall, I didn't do really terrible work here. I think what I could probably focus on for next time is my joins. They're slightly off on some of these, but there's a trick for hiding that when you're creating lettering, so it's not something I have to be too concerned about. I just want to maintain that same angle throughout, which I think I've done pretty well here. Okay. Great job today with the basic strokes. Thank you so much for following along. If you are serious about developing your brush lettering skills, then I encourage you to practice these strokes, including the warm-ups, every day. If you really want to maximize your learning potential, I recommend doing a full sheet of every stroke every day. That's a lot, I know. Or you can just do one row of every stroke every day, whatever you want. But regardless of how many times you practice each stroke, make sure you take it nice and slow and focus on creating deliberate shapes with your writing instrument. The more thought you put into your practice, the more naturally it will come to you. In our next video, we will take what we learned today and start putting all the strokes together to form all of the letters in the lowercase alphabet. I personally love seeing the letters and words come together from a bunch of seemingly random shapes. It's really fun, and I'm very excited to share it with you. So if you're looking forward to that as well, part 3 of this series will be available on the first Sunday of November. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video both relaxing and informative, and I will see you next weekend